So basically, we're narrowing down here a little bit to ask this question of how early warning systems can help your students and school succeed. And good early warning systems combine two things. And sometimes it's important to understand is both these things equal a system. One is accurate and useful indicators, right? Good data that makes sense, that gives you good insight into your kids, and is predictive of both positive and negative outcomes if you don't act upon it, right? It's possible to create a set of indicators that are 100% accurate, but they'll only identify 5 kids out of 100 that need help, right? So it's a balance in the indicators between making sure they're valid and it's worth intervening on, and also that it captures a big enough percent of those kids that absent intervention aren't going to make it, right? So you're toggling between those two ideas. But the indicators really just let you get started. The indicators are not the system, they are not the intervention, they are not what makes a difference. What makes a difference is tying those indicators to effective multi-tiered student supports. And the intermediary piece in that, and I should probably say it's the third part, is really the human systems, right? Sometimes we get so wrapped up in the data systems, we don't recognize that for those data systems to matter, you've got to have a good human system. And the human system, which we're going to talk about in a minute more, is that how you organize your teachers and your adults in your building to both look at the data and pool their insights, because they have as much insights from their daily interaction with their kids as the data does. Use that to formulate interventions, and then someone has to make sure those interventions happen, and then someone's got to track, does it make a difference? That's the human system. That's the hard work of early warning systems. That's where they succeed or fail. And fortunately, the state is really doing a good job of providing you with that data thing up front to solve that data piece, giving you time and energy to solve the human system piece. So it's actually a good partnership between the state and locals there. Lets you focus on the thing that really matters and will make a difference and that you can only solve locally, is building that human system. I'm not going to, we touched on this before. I'm just going to briefly highlight again on the data side that it's really, we're talking about attendance, behavior, course performance, the ABCs. You can have sort of both indicators of off track and indicators of on track. They tend to be high and low in the same element, which does make for a more unified approach. This is not just a meeting about kids that are struggling. This can also be a meeting about kids we need to push to the next level, right? It makes it a much more inclusive process, and also helps a little bit with the fear sometimes people have that early warning system is about labeling kids that aren't going to make it, right? If we start talking about all our kids, what do they need to go forward? What do they need not to fall off track? It becomes a much more inclusive thing. And the fortunate thing is the data is such that all makes sense together. You're not using different indicators for different kids. You're just using same indicators, high and low values. Again, we went through this example, and the states, this was a very early version. The states version is even more prettier and lets you look at things in different ways and bring in different things. But at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. Is the key idea is you have all this data in your school already. There's nothing new about this data, but in many cases you haven't been able to aggregate it at the kid level easily to know for that kid what is their attendance, what is their behavior, what are their grades, right? Typically in a departmentalized middle or high school, if you're an English teacher, you never know what your students' math grades are, right? How would you? There's no system for that to happen, right? No way for you to know that this student is really struggling in your class, but they're doing great in English. And like, why is that? That could give you some insight if you knew that. But typically there's no system that would let you, the English teacher, know how they're doing in other classes. So that's really, at a fundamental level, this is like pooling all this data so you can get one look holistically of the student across things that are known by individual people in the school, but known collectively by very few. All right, so we're going to really focus now on this intervention student support side today. And what have we learned about what we need and what we mean? So effective interventions are essential, but we can't intervene our way to a stronger system. So this is one thing that happens, and everyone who does an early warning system will go through this cycle. It's really part of the learning process. When you first do it, you're going to be focusing a lot on individual kids and individual solutions. That's an important part of the system, but again, it's not actually the main thing. The main thing in the system is figuring out what is the strategic level of intervention, and that strategic level of intervention is usually above the individual student, right? There are some cases that are very unique and you have to solve individually, But typically you're going to find groups of students and bigger groups of students or localized things. And if you don't move to that higher level, you will get overwhelmed. Because if you try to individually intervene for every kid that's showing an off-track indicator or needs to be pushed higher on track, there'll be too many kids and not enough adults to do it. You'll start falling back on triage. Oh, let's just worry about the most needy kids. Or maybe we should worry about the kids that are closest to making it because we can do the most. Or maybe it's these kids. And suddenly, instead of helping all kids, you're now narrow focusing just because that's all the capacity you have. So it's very important to know that once a student has an off-track indicator, you either need to solve a problem or change a behavior, right? If a kid's not coming to school, they're getting in trouble if they're failing, right? Just simply telling them do better is not going to solve it in most cases. At that point in time, if a kid is missing a month or more of school, constantly getting in trouble, failing multiple classes, you either have got to solve the problem that's driving that behavior or you've got to change behavior. And we know that first that requires a strong relationship between the adult and the student. There's no way to change behavior or solve a problem without a relationship, right? We all know that from our own lives. We're not going to change most of our behaviors just because someone tells us to. We're going to be much more motivated if someone we care about is the one motivating us to change that behavior. It's the same for kids. But then the problem is, if there are more students in need than adults that can form these strong relationships, you're in trouble, right? Too many needy kids, not enough adults. So that's why this individual strong relationship, change behavior, solve a problem is a key part of this. But it can't be the thing, right? Because if it's the thing, it will not work. So, what do we know about these systems? We know you have to have ready access to the classroom level data on and off-track indicators for your kids, right? Time is precious in schools, probably even more precious than money, right? And if you get together in a meeting and the data's not there, how often are your teachers going to get together and be in those meetings in the future, right? So it's very important once it's going that the data is there, it's for their kids, and they have it at ease. Again, the State Department of Education has done a lot of good work to lay that groundwork for you and make that easier. You need to set aside time to analyze the data, pool adult knowledge, leverage existing relationships, and organize a system that can be both systematic and tailored. So this is work. You've got to see it as teacher or adult work. You've got to somehow build it into the schedule. It can't be those that want to do it after school on their own time, or you come in early. You could do that for a little while to get it going, to get them a taste of it, but it's not going to be sustained if it's not somehow built into the day and recognized as important adult work. You want to basically build these tiers of support. This is those that do RTI or various things are not going to be too surprised by this, though there are some twists. You really want to have evidence-based whole school and classroom prevention, right? If there's too many kids and not enough adults, you got to have fewer kids, you got to have better prevention, right? You have to have group solutions for kids that have like problems or like geography, so you could deal with them first as a group. And then only when the prevention and the small group doesn't work, do you go to the high intensity case management, right? You have to save this for the kids that nothing else is working for, because again, that's all the person power you have. This is just a graphic to show a way to organize it, the whole school. Extra supports, a key thing on those extra supports, the first sign of need, to all who need it, no triage. And some diagnostic tools. Is this really a cognitive issue or a social emotional issue, right? As we talked about, if you think it's cognitive and it's social emotional, like your first intervention might make it worse. And it's okay, you have to learn and keep going. But you have to really think about what's the driving that behavior, not just assume a low test score means they need a tutor, right? Or acting out means they need to be taught to learn to behave better, right? A few other things before we're going to get into a live example. This intervention discipline we talked about. Don't go to the highest intensity first. We're all compassionate about these kids. We're all very passionate. We want to solve it. We want to help them. If you mass everything you have in the first 5 kids, there's 20 more kids on that list, right, that you've run out of stuff to do with. Use your knowledge of your school and students choosing interventions. It's not about what is the one reading intervention for kids 3 years behind who missed 10% of school. You have to sort of learn about and know your own context and pool from available things. You need a champion with a relationship with a student. to make sure the intervention, if it's targeted or intensive, occurs. We've seen this time and time again. The team assigns it. They assume it happened. They say it's not working. They would need to change it. But no one double-checked to see, was the intervention actually happening, right? Because often there's that communication loop or something, or we didn't quite know that there's a special way to get into this program. We didn't quite do it right, so they weren't accepted. So you have to make someone's business to say, just follow up. Did the intervention happen? Not was it good or bad, but did it happen? So we know. And then we have to track outcomes of our interventions on a regular basis. And again, that's a very nice feature of the state system that many people don't have. The state is built in. Some more advanced ideas on this basic idea. We talked about these diagnostic tools to say, is it academic, social, emotional, or both? Look for these patterns. Is the most strategic level the student, the classroom, the school? So a classic example, you're in your team, you're looking at the data, you see a spike in math failures. You might think, oh, we better organize some math tutors. That's pretty hard to do at scale on short notice. If you looked a little closer, you might see that most of those failures were coming from one teacher. Now, this may not be about the teacher not being a good teacher. It may be that she's got a class of students that are like overwhelmingly special ed or something that he or she's not prepared for, or that was different, right? And that teacher needs coaching is a much more effective intervention than getting a bunch of math tutors for all the kids, right? So that's looking at the highest level you can intervene from the data. And then what's interestingly is many times in the past, people have used demographic data to figure out interventions. And it's actually why dropout prevention got a bad name, because they based it on, you're a black male in special ed, you must need dropout prevention, right? And some of those kids did and some didn't. And some of the other kids that needed help weren't in that demographic and they didn't get help. So when they evaluated the interventions, they found no impact. Because right there, they'd be giving it to some kids who didn't need it and missing other kids that did. So no wonder it didn't have an impact. The sort of modern rethinking of this is if you base it on these actual academic behaviors that matter. Are they in school? Are they focused? Are they paying attention? Do they get their work done? Are they passing their courses? That's what tells you they're on and off track, not the demographics. Now the nuance there is sometimes the demographics help you after the fact to figure out the right intervention. So once the student is signaling based on those academic behaviors, you may want to see, like, are most of the students failing over age, right? Some places have, grade retention policies, and we suddenly have 16-year-old eighth graders, right? No one is angrier than a 16-year-old eighth grader, right? You don't fit, many of you don't fit in the chair, right? So if that's the underlying issue, you've got to solve to get them back with closer to their age peer mates. That demographic knowledge is useful in that case. Same thing, maybe a lot of the kids failing are recent immigrants to the nation, to your school. And that clearly is a different challenge than I'm not getting my work done because I don't feel motivated. So it's a nuance that the demographics can help more after the fact, once the kid is signaling they need help, not as a precursor of who needs help. All right, shall we dig in a little more? All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about specific interventions and what we've sort of been learning, and a lot of learning has come from the field. So we're going to talk about attendance a little bit first. So the first thing, right, is we got to actually measure chronic absenteeism. This is changing, and some of your districts may be on the leading edge of this, but traditionally, what's our attendance measure? Average daily attendance, right? Goes back probably to like when we were all farmers, and then it was used to support funding. And average daily attendance tells you how many kids on average are in the building on a given day. But the truth is this is one of the few cases where we're hardwired to think 90% is good. Like that's just in us, like if 90 must be an A. For attendance, 90%, 91, 92 is actually not good, right? You could have 92, 93% average daily attendance, and you might say, seems decent. Like I know it could be better, but my literacy rate is 35% proficient, and my attendance rate is 92%. I've got to spend my time and energy moving up literacy, and attendance is pretty good. But if you dig deeper, you can find that you could have 91, 92, 93% attendance and have 20% of your kids missing a month of school. because it's different kids on different days making up that 90%. It's not 92% coming every day and 8% never coming, right? And if you dig deeper, you might find that a lot of those kids struggling with literacy are among those that are missing a month of school. And so one thing that it's just never clicked for us is we do all these interventions, and they often get sort of modest results. And we're like, we did all that work, and we got a few points. Like, God, there's got to be a better way, right? What we never tracked in many cases is how many kids actually got that intervention, and how many of those kids were missing a month, 2 months of school, so they weren't actually getting the intervention in any consistent way. So it's not surprising that it didn't work, and it wasn't actually the intervention didn't work, it's the kids didn't really get a big enough dose of it, or more even damaging, they got a little bit that didn't, then a little bit, and then didn't, a little bit, and didn't, right? That's like the worst way to take medicine, right? We know it's like, if you're gonna stop, at least do 10 days of your 14-day cycle. Don't do like 2 days, 2 days off, 1 day, right? That's gonna have no effect, right? But anyways, without tracking chronic absenteeism, we don't know if that's what's happening with some of these interventions. So first, we've got to track it, first step. And then, I talk a little bit about this, and somebody says this is controversial, but I would argue we have to actually create some programming that compels students to come. Because when we've interviewed students about why they don't come to school, and this varies by place and the level of poverty, but there's 3 big buckets. There is, something is pulling me out of school. I'm doing emergency daycare for my siblings, right? Because I have a single parent, or it's both parents work, and they can't cover, and they can't miss it one day of work, they'll lose their job. My sibling is sick, I'm a 13-year-old girl, I stay home and watch them, right? That happens when they start getting to middle school. Some are doing elder care. I was raised by my aunt or my grandfather or my grandparent. They now need help. I'm being heroic, staying home to help them. I don't know anyone else who's going to do it. So there's something pulling them out of school that's outside of school. The next bucket is there's something they're avoiding in school. I'm being teased, I'm being bullied, I don't feel safe in school, I don't feel safe going to school. And it's sometimes like, I didn't get my homework done, I don't want to be yelled at. I mean, it's everything from being very serious to being like adolescent, right, is in that bucket. And then the third one is that kids learn over time that there's a certain amount they can miss and no one reacts. And they learn if your regulations are like 5 days in a row or 3 days or 2 days. And they always try not quite to hit whatever that thing is that triggers real adult attention. And especially, I mean, this varies, and given how Pennsylvania is probably only going to be in a few of the bigger cities, but where kids take mass transit to school, right? The parents can see them get on mass transit, but no one sees what happens at the transfer point. And the schools, the bus isn't pulling up to the schools, right? It's like they're coming from all over. So depending on where it is, the kids can understand the system, and then their calculus is, I can miss X amount and still make it. But they're usually pretty bad judges of that, right? And so that saying is there's basically this idea of something pulling you out of school, something pushing you away, and then especially by adolescence, some level of discretion. And you have to sort of problem solve, right? Because each of those have different solutions. And if you guess wrong, like your solution's not going to really impact the outcome. But sometimes, getting back to this idea of some compelling programming can matter, right? Again, we talk about if there's something like this debate, drama, some of the things that often have to get cut first when we're in budget cuts, right? Or some of the things that like the kids will come for. So you need to think about sometimes, like, is there the compelling thing that we're on the bubble and makes them say, yeah, it's worth going. And then your problem-solving capacity. You're going to probably often have to form some partnerships with the wraparound service providers. Because again, think of those things about staying home to give my grandma a diabetes shot, right? Which is actually a real and growing thing. Medicaid will pay for home health care aides to do that. But someone's got to set that up. Someone's got to know how the system works. Someone's got to make sure they can explain it to the kid and get them used to it. That's going to take a partnership with a wraparound service provider, right? You're probably not going to be able to do that with school personnel. But that's the type of solution that it's going to ultimately take, and that's where these partnerships become very important. All right, I'm going to share a few ideas that actually came from the field, from schools and their ideas, and then I'm going to ask you to add to the pie. So these are simple things that made a big difference, that schools found, like, it was worth a shot. We tried it. It worked much better than I thought. So write a plan. Ask the student to write in some detail what it would take to miss only one day of school next month, right? Sit down, especially this kid that's got chronically absent before, has been missing 10% of school for a while. Sit down and physically write the plan. That's the key thing, is actually writing it out, not just saying it. We actually learned this from the voter mobilization stuff in the last election. Are you going to vote today? I'm going to vote today. Most don't show up. Write down the plan on how you're going to get to the polls. Most show up. It's just that act of actually physically having to create the plan changes the behavior. So actually sit them down and say, realistically, what would it take just to miss a day? Or 2 days even, depending on what the reality is. Keeping up with the Joneses. Show students the attendance records of students who have recently graduated and succeeded in college. Students sometimes think missing a lot of school is the norm. They think they've done this calculus and it's a semi-cultural thing among their friends to miss school, and they think you can miss so much school and still make it. And they don't recognize that there are some kids that miss a lot of school and still graduate, but very few of those kids actually go on to college. So just showing them, this is a recent student from this school or this district, you know, whatever, similar environment to you, and they only miss this much school every, right? Just that actual, giving them actual reflection points that's outside their more narrow peer circle can also get an aha moment. What a day here or a day there could add up to? Students and parents do this. Do you come to school every day? Oh yeah, pretty much. You know, I might miss a day or two a month. Not recognizing that 2 days a month times 10 months is 20 days is a month of school, right? Again, it's a very short time frame. Oh, last month I just missed a day or two. I must be okay. Not knowing that that's aggregating up really rapidly. So again, somebody's just showing that. Happy to see you today, okay? When a kid has been chronically absent and they come back to school, make sure that someone says happy to see you without judgment or tone in their voice and means it. Because often what happens is we're frustrated. Like, these kids are knuckleheads. Like, we want them to succeed. We put a lot of time and effort. Like, we had a plan and they still cut, right? And so you could fall back on sarcasm then. So great to see you today. Wow, what an adventure, you know? Normal human thing to do. But many of these kids are fragile, back to my thing, and that will just send them running away from school to have that kind of reaction when they do come back. Because again, sometimes they're being discretionary, and sometimes they're facing real serious stuff they're not going to tell us about. And if we get that sarcasm wrong, right, we're going to send that kid over here into a tailspin. But so we have to have the positive thing. We're really happy to see you here today. When you get here, there's like happiness that you're here. Like, that's an important pull. Being in school helps others. So instead of just saying this thing, you come so often, you get a personal reward, make it collectively for the class. Just a shout out, not like stuff, just a shout out for the most improved homeroom. And you'll see kids texting their friends, like, get here, like, we want this, right? That's like, let them use their cell phones then, right? So think about this idea that your being here helps others is a way to sort of change the dynamic as opposed to just it's about you. And follow the peer leaders. Organize students to measure, monitor, and act. So again, we found, again, this is what schools did this, is that they were trying to have, they call them success mentors in New York City, people that would, like, when kids were absent, would call them, what can we do to get you here by 10? We miss you, what's the story? Form that relationship. And they ran out of adults. So they said, can we use 12th graders? Can we use 9th graders for middle school kids? And there was a little bit of hesitancy at first, like, are they going to be mature enough? Will it work? Well, you have to, be thoughtful about who you select to do this, but they found that some of them are even more powerful because they could be a little more in their face to certain kids than the adults could be. Like, I played that game, don't even try. Like, just stop. Like, don't even run that thing, because that's what I did, and like, you're on my team, I'm the captain, I'm the homeroom captain, and I'm the 12th grade, I'm talking to 9th graders, and I want you all here, right? Because you're my team, and I'm gonna, let them go to the office, make the phone call. That twisting that peer relationship, peer power, can be a very effective strategy, and again, sort of a no-cost way to do it. All right, so just a couple things more. an important mitigation strategy. I often tell people, right, that cigarettes, right, they say, you know, it's like cigarettes are bad for you, but it's the tar that kills you, right? So that attendance, not coming to school is bad for you. It's not getting your assignments done that you missed is what kills you, right? Especially in high school, a little bit of middle school, because if you don't turn your assignment in, you get what? 0, right? What happens is kids miss school, they don't get the work done, they collect their zeros. They actually pass their final, like barely, by a point. But they often might end up still failing the class, right? Because they had all those zeros built up. The kids don't always connect that, and they make it very personal. I passed the test and you failed me, right? And now it becomes a whole like interpersonal battle the wrong way. So the key thing to remember is when kids are missing school, you have to mitigate that assignment thing somehow. Not that you're going to give it to them. They have to earn it. They have to do the work. But they have to have an opportunity, an avenue to do the work. And honestly, I'm sure everyone's school here is like totally not this at all. But this is one place where there's actually a pretty big divide between higher and lower income schools. In higher income schools, typically, where there's not a lot of absenteeism, kids and parents are often hounded. Like, you missed 2 days, like, where's your work? Get it done. Like, there's people like that took their kids out to go to college interviews. They get called, like, your kid's missing, get the work done. They can do that because it's just a few kids. And a kid that's more struggling, and it's 100 kids, nobody gets called. Nobody gets followed up with, right? It's all put back on them. So just have to really think about what's your mitigation strategy for making up missed work when kids are absent. What's a fair system that's, doesn't give it to them, but gives them an opportunity to recover? Doesn't make it that like there's almost nothing could happen. And doesn't put it on the kid to go to a lot of different teachers that may or may not make it easy to say, like, what did I miss? How do I make it up, right? Just a reminder, attendance is 8 times more predictive of course failure than prior test scores, so being there matters. No surprise, but remind ourselves. A little bit on course performance. This idea that we have to provide some coaching support, on occasion even advocacy, to help students succeed in their courses. Routine for assignment completion, preparing for quizzes, helping them catch up when absent, right? That's when there's a lot of kids, it gets overwhelming. We have to think of some sort of strategy, some sort of partnership, some sort of way that they get that support. A key thing where we sometimes fall off track, not through any real intention, but just things falling through the cracks, is that tutoring. Tutoring is often provided by an out-of-school provider after school, or a provider in the building, but an external provider. And sometimes the communication's not great. The tutoring group is told, kids that come to you need help with math. They're struggling with math, they need math tutoring. The group gives them a pre-test, finds out, you guys are struggling in fractions. Fractions are important. Let's teach fractions. They teach fractions well. They do well in their post-tests. All the adults are happy. Kids go to tutoring, it seems effective. They learn fractions. Problem is, test on Friday was on probability. Nobody helped the kid on probability and they failed the test, right? So it's really important that tutoring is not just used to build skills in general. There's an important role for that, and in the right time and place it makes sense. But tutoring has also got to be aligned to course expectations, course tests, course quizzes, course projects. Otherwise, like, you're helping, with learning how to make pasta, but everyone is eating like steak or something, right? It just doesn't quite work. And then we have to figure out some second chance and recovery programs to keep kids accountable, but gives them a reason to keep trying, right? Again, some places and sometimes have these policies. You miss 10 days, you fail, no matter what you do, right? Because we're trying to say being here matters. They have various things. Where it makes it impossible for the kid to recover. If you hit a dead end, like, you're not going to keep going down the road. You're just going to stop, right? If you tell me there's no way I can pass this course, then I should just skip school for the whole semester and just start over again, right? That's not productive. 4 questions to ask ourselves when kids are struggling on things. Are they regularly coming, right? That could be the easy thing. Are they able to focus on their schoolwork when they're in school, right? They come, but they can't focus. That's a different issue. Are they productively persistent? Are they trying in an effective manner, right? Sometimes people have ineffective strategies where they just keep hammering it, but it doesn't work. And so they're coming, they're focusing, but they got a bad strategy. Remember we saw that thing in the keynote? Only 47% of kids say I have many ways to get good grades. They have a single strategy. I just study, I underline, I highlight, I study, I underline, I highlight, whatever it is, and it may not be effective, even though they are trying and they're putting effort into it. And do they connect school effort to life success? We've talked about that quite a bit. Behavior, again, we've gone through a lot of this. Need to teach resiliency, self-management, organization skills, especially in the middle grades forward, probably late elementary. Again, I haven't told people, this is sort of like way back when we said, oh, kids just learn to read naturally, right? They just get exposure, they learn to read, and then we found, no, for a big subset of kids, we have to give formalized, specific, evidence-based instruction. It's the same thing with these things. Back in the day, when only some people went to college and some people got jobs after high school that got them in the middle class, it didn't involve college, it was the kids that learned self-management, organization on their own outside of school that went to college, right? And those that didn't. But now that we all have to have post-secondary training, we actually have to teach this stuff, right? Because everybody needs it in some form. We can't just be dependent on those that learn it outside of school make it. And let's see, one more. Two other quick ones that just, again, seem simple but often fall through the cracks. That school for kids, especially once they start changing classes, don't just have a self-contained class, is the series of teachers they pass through in the day plus the hallways. If the academic and behavioral expectations differ greatly classroom to classroom, as they often do, right? If you open your eyes, just follow a group of kids throughout the day and see like very different expectations, either academic or behavior. Kids that internalize school as an individual thing, mean teacher, nice teacher, good teacher, bad teacher, easy teacher, hard teacher, and adjust their behavior accordingly. If you're able to get to the point where there's a reasonable continuity, there's always going to be teacher variation, it's never going to be perfect, but reasonable continuity in academic behavioral expectations, kids learn that's just how you behave in school, right? And it makes your life so much easier because they just think in school we behave this way, and it's not all this individualized, to each teacher I customize my behavior and response. And we talked about this success script stuff, that especially when kids have come in with prior failure, they're trying to avoid future failure at all costs because failure stings. They have a failure script in their head and they're trying to avoid it, which often leads to unproductive behaviors. You've got to flip that and start building these success scripts. And that's where we talked about many of these ways where there's short-term cycles, you put some effort in, you get some progress, it helps turning that back around. Now we're tired. So one last big idea, and then we can take a deep breath and ask some questions. So one good technology I just want to leave you with is something called report card conferences. Many of you may do this, but it's the idea that, again, especially from middle school forward, it becomes quite rare for students to necessarily discuss their grades with anyone, right? They may or may not discuss them with their parents. They may or may not find a way to not let the parents fully know what they are. It all depends. As we said, in the school, once you become departmentalized, the group of adults don't know, they never see the kids' grades collectively. They only talk about their grade with their student if they so choose. Report card conferences is that at every report card, the students get a 10-minute conference in school with an adult who's not one of their teachers. There's scripts worked out ahead of time for if you're passing everything, if you're doing great in everything, if you're failing one thing, if you're failing things. So you could bring ultimately external people in to help facilitate it. It's just this idea of this quick interaction with another adult who takes interest in you, even though they don't have a great, you know them before necessarily, but it's just teaching you that adults can care about you and give you guidance and give you support. And it lets the kids talk much more freely about what happened because this person is not an authority over them. It's not going to get necessarily back to their parents. And those people learn so much that as an aggregate they can funnel back, not as individual stories, but as patterns, that it's often eye-opening for principals, right? They often find a way to get the feedback, sort of anonymous, but then they do PDs out of it often. They see we need our PDs around. People get nervous about the privacy. Almost every place has found a way to work it out by giving kids the ability to opt out if they don't want to, not letting them take any of the data out with them, just they get to look at it quickly and then they have to turn it back. And what oftentimes people have found is it's also a way to flip the community's view of the school, especially if it's been a struggling school. So some places will ultimately get the mayor to come in, the chief of police to come in, and they're like, oh, we always thought this was sort of a rough school. These are great kids. This kid told me this story. It can even flip that relationship. So again, it's another one of these examples of just a small human system that's not you can basically train people in the morning for an hour, have some supervision, and like run it in a day, right? And it's a way to sort of do mass guidance counseling, if you will, right? But in a way that like gives every kid a consistent, every report card they're getting feedback. So that's just, I want to leave you that. That's just an idea. We try to bring this all together, that really early warning systems are the data. The state's done you a huge favor in creating a system that lets you get at your classroom, at your fingertips, the data you need. But to do anything with that, you have to organize adults to pool their knowledge, build the interventions based on their knowledge, assign a champion to make sure it happens, evaluate the information. But above all, you have to build the human systems to make this work. And it's both the human systems so the teachers can pool their thing, and then your interventions, as we've talked about, are often based on just changing interactions in small ways that can make a big difference. And the thing that just I'll tell you is that, sure, I'm an advocate for this, and I probably have my own bias, but when people, as is natural and as right, will say this is just one more thing, one more burden put on teachers, one more meeting, one more thing. We had RTI, we had PBIS, now we have all these acronym things. But in most cases, if it's a reasonable setup, they see the power and the value, and they will keep doing it on their own, even if the system stops. Because they see the power to be able to pool their knowledge with other teachers and create teams to work on these issues that individually seem very hard to make a dent in. And then collectively, that makes the whole school stronger. So that's really how early warning systems can make your school succeed. Thanks.